You don't need a beard to listen. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at www.beardedtheologians.com. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
This week on the Bearded Theologians, I'm going to ask Zach to kind of recap our experience from the World Methodist Conference, and so I'll hand it over to Zach right now.
Yeah, so as you know, you saw a lot of our content on Facebook, some of our live feeds, things like that, from the World Methodist Conference. And just a little background behind it, it's a conference that Wesleyans and Methodists from all over the world got together. And it was a different kind of conference. Most conferences that we go to as leaders in the church have something to do with voting or legislation or resolutions. There's always business to be done at these. And, this one was different. We got to go and simply worship and be brothers and sisters in Christ and come together under that common denominator that we have as Wesleyans, being Jesus, being the love of Christ. And it was refreshing. And I think as leaders in the church and in our churches and in our denomination, we have something to learn from an event like that. That not every time we come together as a church, whether it be local, global, national, whatever, that it has to revolve around business. I think it is imperative for the health and culture of our church moving forward that we need to come together under the guides of simply worship. And too often when we come under the guides of business, it becomes worship becomes an afterthought. And so that was the thing that I appreciated the most. One, getting to know people from all over the world. There were like 2,500 people there. I don't know, I'm going to throw a random number out there. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe not. Don't fact check me. But something like 80 Wesleyan denominations were represented. I don't know, saw it on paper somewhere. It could have been 3. I don't remember. It's been a couple of weeks. But in the grand scheme of things, kind of what I'm trying to get to is it was awesome. There were a lot of people there, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different aspects, a lot of different cultures. And it was really, really cool to see that come through. At one point we sang, we didn't sing, I guess we sang and danced to the Love Train. And the really cool thing I saw there was bishops and lay people and clergy from all over the world, black, white, yellow, red, green, purple. Everybody just put all of that aside and danced and came together, people. And so that's pretty cool. If I learned anything from the World Methodist Conference, it was that I still do have a little hope in humanity and a whole lot of hope in the church, that we can set the things that we disagree on or make us different aside and come together Christ. So it was a cool event. If you can go in the future, whether you're Methodist or not, I think it would be a pretty cool cultural experience. And in 5 years, they go on a quinquennium. I learned a new word at the World Methodist Conference. Quinquennium.
Quinquennium.
Quinquennium. And it's going to be in Sweden, right?
Yeah, because
right,
we held the flag for the United Church in Sweden.
That's right. That's right. We were hoping that would get us a sponsor to send us in 5 years. That has not panned out yet, but we're hopeful. But if you can go to Sweden in 5 years, come go with us. We're going to try to go. We really need to go over there. The other thing that was really cool that we got to do along that frame was we got to talk to a lot of really cool people. Both bishops, clergy, and lay people from all over the world. We got to have really cool conversations about their ministries. And today's podcast, beyond this little spiel right here, is going to be an interview we did with Pastor Hannah Bonner, who is doing some really, really awesome ministry out in the Houston area. That's different. That's neat. And so stay tuned to us here and check out that interview with her. Franks is holding up her book, The Shout, that kind of outlines what she's doing with her ministry there. We encourage you to check it out. Read it, do it, make it work on your context. And, it's just another way that we can go out and reach people.
So you can say this is our sponsor, not sponsor for the week, is the Hannah Bonner's book, The Shout. We'd encourage you to pick up the study. It's a great and we had a great interview with Hannah, and so we'll turn that interview over to her now. So,
welcome to the Bearded Theologians. I'm Zach Bechtold,
and I'm Matt Franks.
And today we have with us the Reverend Hannah Bonner, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself. And we're going to ask her some questions, do all the fun things that we do here on the podcast. And so, Pastor Hannah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What do you do? You know, those kinds of things.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm from Philadelphia, but I live about 5 minutes from where we're recording this right now, here in Houston, Texas. So I'm an ordained elder in the Eastern Pennsylvania Annual Conference, and I'm living down here in Texas, where I curate spoken word poetry-focused arts and justice movement called The Shout. And so I basically work to create platforms to amplify voices of artists in our city that need to be heard. So my role is to it's a little different than the typical pastor, because I work to create a pulpit in places where pulpits don't exist, so that people who aren't being heard can be heard in these places.
That's awesome. I find it interesting that you describe yourself as on loan here in Texas.
Well, I mean, I love my Texas family. I love being here in Texas, but I'm a proud Yankee. You know, I am. I've spent most of my adult life in the South, and so you kind of get ribbed a lot for being a Yankee, and over time, the persecution.
See, I grew up in Texas, so leaving Texas, I get the same thing. Oh, you're
right. So you understand.
I do. I totally
when you're from somewhere else, like you kind of start to feel the need to tell people.
That's right. That's right. Very good. Matt, you have some questions.
Well, Hannah, you have a great new piece of curriculum out there, and so I'd love for you to share with share with our listeners the curriculum that you have produced.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was approached by Abingdon with this opportunity to create a curriculum based on the work that we do as The Shout. And so talk to my poets, and we try to create this curriculum in a way that involves their voices and their input. The Shout itself is an attempt to basically give life to the text Isaiah 58. So the first word of Isaiah 58 is shout. So that's where our name comes from. And so Isaiah asks us to receive this what I see as spoken word poetry, which is this passage where the people of God are complaining to God, and they're saying, you know, we're fasting and we're praying, but you're not listening to us, you're not doing what we're asking, right? They're very frustrated with God, and God kind of responds back. This is the Hannah translation. God kind of responds back, you know, you say, I'm not listening to you, but you're not listening to me. Because I look at how you're living, and it looks like you're fasting and you're praying simply in order to mistreat your workers and strike one another with an angry fist. So it looks like the religion you're practicing, you're doing it in order to harm people if we looked at the results of what is coming from it. So in reality, it's not me that's not listening to you, it's you that's not listening to me, because I told you what I wanted you to do. And what I told you, and I'll repeat it for you, which is that the fast that I choose, God says, is to loose the bonds of injustice, to let the oppressed go free. When you see the hungry, to feed them, the naked, to cover them, the homeless, to bring them into your home. And so God makes clear what it is that God has really said, and takes away this complacency, this stagnation that the people have settled into, of thinking that they can just perform religious rituals and that be enough. And God is instead saying, like, almost, I'd rather you not do that if you're not doing this other stuff that's more important to me. And so it's a passage of of hope. It's a hard passage to hear for some people, but it's also a passage of hope for those who are the ones who are being oppressed. In the beginning part where God says, talks about oppressing workers and striking with an angry fist, there are people that find themselves in that part of the story. And so for them, it's a passage of hope, whereas for those that may be committing injustice, it might be a hard passage to hear. But basically, we take a line from that passage each month, and we ask poets and artists, dancers, musicians in the community to respond to that one line, which we make into a question or a statement, and we curate a whole show. So the show that we did this past week was called We Rise, and it was actually it was a show that was a fundraiser for domestic violence survivors, and everybody who performed was personally impacted, either as a survivor of domestic violence or as a relative of somebody who'd been killed through domestic violence. And so to have them respond, they're the ones who maybe find themselves more at home in that first part of the passage, like I said, where they find hope in the people who are doing harm being called out, right? And so they were able to lift their voices and to really create such a powerful event. And the thing about the shout events is whenever they end, we kind of don't want to go home. And so it's really a powerful experience. And so what we've done with the curriculum is we basically have taken 6 of the questions that we asked in 2015, and we have written a 1-week part on each question. So 6 of the questions that we used, and we wrote a 6-week study using those questions. And so each chapter, one of the poets helps with a portion of writing that chapter. And there's ways to engage and ways to be artistic yourself throughout the book. But the big picture is to help people to think about how can we hear other people rather than simply thinking about amplifying our own voices. Someone in our community needs to be heard. And to get a congregation to spend 6 weeks thinking who's not being heard, and not just how can we speak for them, because a lot of times we talk about being the voice of the voiceless. The reality is, unless somebody actually cannot speak, they have a voice. And our goal shouldn't be to be the voice for them, but to create ways to strengthen and empower and create platforms for them to be heard. And so that's part of how this study kind of creates a paradigm shift.
It does, and it's. I love what you guys are doing in one, creating pulpits where there's no pulpits, but 2, rather than using your own voice to speak for those who don't, can't, or won't, you're allowing room for them to speak for themselves, and that's huge because that takes out what we think they need and gives them the power to say, "Here's what we really need." And that's huge, and we're seeing today in our culture and society that we're saying a lot of things that, hey, this is what people need. It's what we think they need and not what they truly need. So opening up that opportunity for that space is huge. And thanks for that model, that encouragement. Thanks for what you guys are doing. And it's encouraging for those of us back in the local church and in our own pulpits and cities and communities that hurts.
Thank you. Yeah, I think as a church, we're becoming increasingly aware of how we have behaved in paternalistic ways, right? How we have imposed the will of the majority and not always gone in and listened to a community, gone in with a plan for what we were going to do and what that community's problems were. And so I think we're blessed to live in a time period where the church has become aware of that and where voices are crying out and refusing to be silenced. And so being blessed to live in such a time, our challenge is then how do we live into that? And how do we find new ways forward? So this is one way.
And I think that's a great way to have something that we can hopefully inspire churches to look at in a curriculum where maybe they're in a situation where they've never heard that before. because far too often, and you raise it up, that it was a parent mentality, like, oh, we know what's best for you. This is how we're going to help you. But you, through this, you shift that focus, and you allow the people who are searching or in loss or in need of justice to speak, and whatever that may mean, whether it's someone who's hungry, letting their voice be heard, or and I find that so valuable because far too often, preachers, pastors, whatever, they inspire congregations to go out, but they never equip them to be able to listen to the real voice of what's going on. And we have people that come in with these preconceived notions of, well, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to give you what you need, even though I have no clue what you need. And that's almost like putting a huge, heavy Band-Aid on a paper cut, and it really does not the help that it really needs. So I value what you do. I actually had an experience, it's been 2 years ago since in Austin, where I got to experience the Shout in Austin. And if you're ever in the Houston area, would encourage you to look it up and to have a Shout experience, because I know that after I left the show, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like it was one of those experiences that, one, you really can't replicate. And that's something I love, those kind of ministries that you can't replicate anywhere else. But I also like those opportunities and experiences where it's like, wow, like this definitely will go on one of those kind of memory belts that that we'll have forever. And so, like I said, I appreciate the work that you do here in the Houston area, because you are a big voice of justice, and I appreciate it. At least I won't speak for Zach, but
I appreciate it.
Yeah, he appreciates it. So, hey, I want to kind of end with one question. What gives you life?
I think that when I see somebody really be able to feel their own power, that's really life-giving for me. So for somebody perhaps who's been silenced, who hasn't been heard, who hasn't spoken up, and when they not only have a mic in their hand, but they have learned how to use it, they've worked with mentors and they've really honed their skills, and they finally get up there and they blow the crowd away and they feel their power, and their life changes because they realize what they're capable of doing in this world. Like that's life-changing for me, and I want to create that experience for as many people as possible.
Awesome. Well, we'd encourage you to check out, it's The Shout.
The Shout, and just to say, you mentioned it can't be replicated, and that's the whole point of creating this curriculum, not to replicate it, but to guide each congregation who uses it through a process of figuring out what gifts, what platforms do they have, what voices, what art forms, or other ways that people are speaking on their community exist, how to bring those together, how can they not do exactly what we do, but do what we do in terms of hearing voices that aren't being heard and amplifying them.
Well, Hannah, we know you have a busy schedule, and we thank you for your time sitting down with us here at World Methodist Conference. And we encourage everybody to listen to pick up a copy of the curriculum, The Shout, and find a way, maybe in a small group or in some local church setting, where you can apply this curriculum and begin to wrestle with those questions. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
And I'm Zach Bexel.
And we'll see you next time.
You just listened to the Bearded Theologians podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com.